The stars bent into a spiral, a celestial omen, long forgotten. The spiral of Agros. Cole Everhart never sought destiny, yet in his hands awakens Merlin's wand, and with it, the power to decide the fate of all magic. Darkness stirs, councils divide, the world waits for the blood of Merlin to rise once more. And so, the last wizard's tale begins. The sky did not break with thunder, it sang with color, with movement, with the kind of silence that preceded both awe and devastation. Above Caerwyn, a small town nestled between craggy Welsh hills, in ruins older than memory, the stars contorted into a spiral, hues of violet, gold, and deep crimson weaving through the heavens like silk thread caught in divine wind. People stumbled from pubs and porches, eyes fixed upward, breath caught. Far from the street lamps in the pine-strewn hills beyond the town, Cole Everhart, 23 and tired of everything, watched from the edge of a broken fence. He hadn't meant to come out here. It was habit more than curiosity. Since his mother died, he'd stopped believing in signs, and myths, and things with meaning. But when the stars shifted, and the spiral bloomed in the night sky, something in his chest fluttered, something ancient and aching. He clutched at his ribs and staggered back. Across the world, others felt it too. In Kathmandu, a temple bell rang itself. In a ruined chamber beneath Stonehenge, a slumbering glyph reignited, and in the frozen archives of Akator Keep, an old wizard bled from the nose and wept with joy and terror. The spiral of Agros had returned, long forgotten by the modern world, but etched in the hidden volumes of Avalon. The alignment marked the reawakening of a sealed entity, one born not of natural darkness, but of corrupted light, a force Merlin himself had once confronted and banished at great cost, a force that fed on the ley lines of the earth, unraveling magic not by destruction, but by consumption. And now, it had begun again. 2 nights later, Cole sat alone outside the mechanic's garage where he worked, knuckles grease-stained and soul restless. That's when she came. She moved like wind over still water, quiet, sure, unsettling, cloaked in a robe the color of ash and stormlight. Illyria looked no older than 30, though her eyes held centuries. Her presence didn't fill space, it bent it. You felt it, she said, voice low, sharp. Didn't you? Cole blinked. I don't know what I felt. You do, you just don't want to name it. She held out a long object, wrapped in black cloth. This has waited for you. Cole didn't move. What is it? Merlin's wand, Illyria said simply. Dormant since the moment he vanished. He laughed, short, bitter. You've got the wrong guy. No, she said. We don't. You are his blood. You were the first in 300 years to stir the wand. And if you don't take it, everything that lives by magic will die. He turned to leave, but the wand pulsed in the cloth, as if it heard him, as if it recognized him. Against his better judgment, Cole reached out. The moment his fingers brushed it, warmth shot up his arm, into his spine, into his mind. Visions, storms, shadows crawling over mountains, towers falling, a burning forest, and behind it all, a voice, not Illyria's, not his own. It begins again. The entrance to Tall Varen was hidden beneath a dried-out lakebed, masked by enchantments so old they tasted like dust in the air. Cole followed Illyria in silence, their footsteps echoing in a narrow tunnel lined with phosphorescent moss and forgotten bones. As they stepped through the final arch, the passage opened into a collapsed courtyard. Once, Tall Varen had been a citadel of legend, a sanctuary for arcanists and spellwrights who shaped the magical laws of the world. Now, it was crumbling. Vines devoured spires, statues lay cracked in weeping moss. Magic still clung to the stone, like a breath held too long. Illyria led him past a spiral staircase twisted by time, and into a high chamber veiled in golden light. Runes danced along the stained glass windows. Bookshelves lined every wall, some sagging under the weight of tomes, whose language had been extinct since before Rome. This is where your training begins, she said. Cole lifted a brow. You mean wand waving and muttered spells? Illyria turned sharply. Magic is not a parlor trick. It is law and consequence. What you hold, she gestured to the wand at his side, was crafted by a man who rewrote the threads of fate. If you treat it like a toy, it will burn you. And so began his apprenticeship, not only in elemental command, but in translating the foundations of old magic. He studied grimoire after grimoire, most written in scripts that moved when unobserved. Days passed in ink-stained frustration, nights in silent meditation under the broken dome. Yet something began to stir in him, not power exactly, but alignment, as if his soul had been waiting for this language all along. Then, in a hidden alcove behind the Grand Archives ruined stairwell, Cole discovered it, a book with no title, its binding sealed by Merlin's sigil. It whispered when touched, not words, but possibilities. He opened it. The contents weren't spells, they were blueprints, instructions not to manipulate, but to create. And deep within its last pages was something darker, a forbidden sequence of runes, cracked and half burned, written in Merlin's own hand. A spell of finality, a seal strong enough to bind the returning shadow forever. But the ink bled around the warning. Creation demands sacrifice. One must pay the price. One must be unwritten. Cole slammed the book shut. The magical world had taken notice of his presence. Word spread like fire across secret circles. Rogue sorcerers sent spies. The Ninefold Council, fractured and paranoid, issued a motion to contain him. And in the southern wastes, exiled witches whispered of ancient revenge. Many wanted him dead. Others wanted to use him. Only Illyria remained constant, unyielding, cold, never watching. She trained him with the precision of a sculptor, but she never smiled, never softened. Still, Cole saw it, just behind her gaze, a sorrow tightly bound, a regret never voiced. One night, as he practiced sigil weaving under the flickering light of room candles, he asked softly, "Why do you care what happens to the world?" She paused and turned away. "I don't," she said, but her voice broke just enough to betray the truth. The world beyond Tall Varen is no longer safe. News of Cole's emergence spread like wildfire through the magical underworld. His lineage, his power, and most dangerously, his potential, drew allies and enemies in equal measure. But few were as relentless as a hollowed circle. Former mages stripped of conscience, bound to the returning darkness, craving a world where magic answered only to will. Cole and Illyria had no choice but to move quickly. The forbidden spell required 3 arcane components, each nearly impossible to acquire. First, a phoenix breath, the raw flame of rebirth harvested at the moment of death and resurrection. Second, the tear of forgotten God, lost to the time and ruins where no prayers were answered. And third, a ruin buried beneath the first battlefield of magic, a place that had been sealed by ancient wards and blood sacrifice. They traveled by shifting paths, ley-lined shortcuts that twisted geography, reshaping distance like origami. Cole began to understand magic not just as energy, but as rhythm, motion, even memory. He could now feel spells stirring before Illyria spoke them, and though she remained curt and withdrawn, their silences were no longer cold. But not all enemies waited for them to arrive. At dusk, just beyond the shattered outposts of Alveith, the sky turned dark with conjured ash. The ambush became swift. Dozens of hollowed mages cloaked in shadow and smoke, forming sigils with twisted bone and blood. Spells cracked through the air like lightning. Illyria met them without hesitation, her form encased in fire and storm. She moved like a tempest, elegant, merciless. But it was a losing battle. For every attacker felled, more emerged. A child no older than 7 darted from the tree line, bloodied, sobbing, caught in the chaos. Cole ran. He shielded the child with his own body, lifting his hand instinctively. The glyph he had practiced only days earlier, unfinished, unstable, blazed to life on his palm. Magic surged through him like a scream underwater. The air rippled, then cracked. A wave of force exploded outward, scattering the attackers and breaking their formation. Silence fell. When the dust settled, Illyria stood panting, blood in her hair, and eyes wild, not with fear, but with something closer to awe. "You used a soul-bound glyph," she said, "without formal binding." Cole lowered his hand, shaking. Didn't have time to think. They didn't speak again until later, when the child had been taken to safety by local healers, and the fires of battle had died down. They sat beneath the collapsed arch of an Avalus shrine, bathed in moonlight and ash. "You remind me of him," Illyria said quietly. Cole turned. "Merlin?" She nodded. "He was reckless, but kind. Too kind sometimes. He taught that magic should serve the living, not rule them." There was a long pause. "I loved him," she said, so softly it nearly vanished into the wind. Cole didn't flinch. "And you know what he'd want me to do." She looked away. "He'd want you to live." Cole watched the embers in her eyes flicker with something gentler than before. The journey continued, but now each step was measured, not just in danger, but in trust. The sky bled fire. Celestial tears, fragments of divine light, rained from the heavens as the spiral of Agros reached its zenith. Each beam of light fractured the fabric between worlds, and through the rift came Verithus, the Unmaker, a writhing force without shape, formed of hunger and the echo of ruined spells. It spoke in silence, devoured magic in waves, and left only stillness behind. No ash, no ruin, just void. Whole sanctuaries blinked from existence. Forests that had sung with laden energy for millennia collapsed into dust. The last bastions of old magic, Valerian, Oldspire, the vault of silence, vanished like candle smoke. Atop the stone of mourning, a monolithic plateau carved by Merlin himself, Cole and Illyria arrived under a sky veined with chaos. The spell was complete. Cole stood before the convergence point, the wand glowing in one hand, the grimoire in the other. Wind howled with voices not meant for mortal ears. Runes floated in the air around them, drawn from the forbidden pages and refined through nights of sleepless translation and half-burned parchment. The spell would work, the seal would hold, but one line, just one, had always been smudged, unclear, until now. Cole read it again. From life, a tether, from soul, the seal. One must burn, so all may endure. His blood ran cold. "It needs a caster," he whispered, "a final anchor, a life." Illyria turned toward him, knowing the truth even before he spoke. That's why Merlin never finished it. He stepped forward, the wind slicing across his skin like blades. "And I'll do it. I'm ready." But Illyria reached out and stopped him, her hand firm on his chest. "No, Illyria, you have to live," she said, her voice low, breaking. "The world needs someone to remember." Before he could argue, she whispered the activation phrase, an ancient name or power spoken only by those who had touched the root of creation. A radiant ward erupted around her, in a dome of spinning light and golden runes. Cole slammed into it, fist pounding against the invisible wall. "No, you can't. Illyria, stop." She stood within, serene and burning bright, the wand lifted in her hand, his wand, now guided by her voice. The spell took shape, raw and magnificent, arching into the sky with ribbons of fire, silver flame. "I saw what's in you, Cole," she said, her voice trembling. "The good, the love, the hope." Tears streamed down his face as he shouted, but the wind stole his words. She smiled. "Don't let the world forget us." Then she raised the wand to the sky, her body unraveling into light as the spell reached its crescendo. A roar from Verithus filled the heavens, and in a burst of brilliance that shattered the clouds, the entity was pulled backward into the rift, screaming into eternity. The seal locked, the spiral dimmed, the sky went still, and Illyria was gone. Cole collapsed to his knees as the last spark of her vanished. The world was saved, magic endured, but the cost would echo forever. Peace returned slowly, like warmth after a long storm. In the days following the sealing of Verithus, the magical world limped into recovery. The rifts closed, the ley lines steadied, cities lost to the void were remembered in silence and rebuilt in reverence. Factions that once vied for power now met in solemn councils, bound by a rare, shared humility. The hollowed circle vanished, what remained of them scattered into obscurity. The ninefold council, fractured and shamed, Disbanded and across enchanted libraries and ancient towers, the old magical tomes began to rewrite themselves, names shimmering into place with ink not laid by hand, but by fate. Cole Everhart, they now read, the last flame, he who stood when the others faltered, blood of Merlin, bearer of the wand. But Cole no longer lingered in their halls. He had left the sanctums behind. Now he sat at the edge of a high cliff where the stars met the sea, and the wind smelled of salt and lavender. The sky painted in the hues of late dusk, mauve, amber, deep rose, seemed to bleed gently into the horizon. Below, waves rolled in rhythm like a lullaby sung by the earth. In his hand he held a lyre's pendant, a small obsidian shard suspended from a silver thread. It was warm, always warm, as if it remembered her touch. The wand of Merlin rested beside him in the grass, inert now. Its light had dimmed, the wood felt heavier, but it still listened. He could feel it, and yet Cole said nothing. He didn't need to. The world thought him a hero, some called him the rebirth of the old ways, some whispered he might be the last wizard the world would ever know. But Cole didn't care for legend, he cared for her, for the way she said his name when she was tired, for the flicker of mischief she hid beneath her cold facade, for the burden she bore alone for centuries, until she chose to give everything, not for glory, but for a boy who reminded her of love, and a world worth saving. He didn't cry. The grief was too deep for tears. It lived in his breath, in the silence between heartbeats, in the way he traced the curve of her pendant with his thumb. It lived in the way he looked out over the horizon, not seeking answers, but holding vigil, because someone had to remember. That was the promise. And so, beneath the painted sky, the last wizard began his watch. He would protect what was left. He would teach those who came after, if they came. He would remember not just the battle, but the woman who believed in more than power, who gave him everything so the world could still dream. The wind shifted soft and cool, and in its hush her name echoed, not in sound, but in memory. Alira. Cole closed his eyes, breathing in the sky. The world was safe, but not whole.